When something like this happens, when somebody goes missing, you want answers. But this case is incredibly unique when you started to dig a little bit deeper. Nothing is what it seems.
Suzanne Morphew went missing on Mother's Day in May of 2020, and from there on out, it became a nationwide search for her.
Suzanne Morphew left for a bike ride, and she never came back.
She has 2 beautiful daughters. The family looks to be perfect from the outside. Every picture you saw of them, they're smiling, they're laughing, they're looking like they love each other. She grew up in Indiana, she came to Colorado, and she began to mountain bike.
We see pictures of a beautiful woman, an active, physically fit woman, taking advantage of the mountains.
Barry Morphew was a business owner. He was an avid hunter and a man's man. On May 9th, Barry was very happy because there had been some marital tension, but not on May 9th.
All we have to go on is what Barry says occurred.
That's right. Barry says they had a nice dinner together, they even made love, and then they went to sleep, and she was still sleeping the next morning when he left for work.
So the next day, Mother's Day, the daughters are out on a camping trip. Did that strike people as odd?
Family had told investigators that it was odd that their daughters would not be with their mom. She didn't have anything else to do, and all of a sudden, her daughters and her husband are both gone.
Barry Morphew said he texted his wife, Suzanne, to wish her a happy Mother's Day. He received no reply. He had contact with his daughters, back and forth, can't get a hold of Mother.
And then someone contacted a neighbor.
Right. The neighbor had told Barry that her car's here, she was not home. And Barry says, well, maybe go look for her bike because she's an avid mountain biker. The neighbor said he could not find it.
Local law enforcement responds to the scene, and they do find her bicycle.
Where was that bike?
It's right over here, Peter. The bike was found at the bottom of this ravine right here.
The initial thought is kidnapping.
Oh, Suzanne, if anyone is out there that can hear this, that has you, will do whatever it takes to bring you back.
So about 10 days into the investigation, they learn about a piece of technology that we have an example of right in front of you. What is that?
Right, so they find a spy pin. It looks something like this, and they find it in the master bedroom of the Morphew home.
It's like James Bond. It's a pen that looks like a regular pen, and it records conversations.
This spy pen was given to Suzanne to record Barry Morphew in hopes of catching him in an affair.
It backfired, in fact.
As a matter of fact, it backfired.
Captured on the spy pen is a conversation between Suzanne Morphew and somebody named Jeff. And it's clear that Jeff is her lover.
They did not know who Jeff was, but it put a new wrinkle into the case for sure.
What happened on this road is a real mystery. No one knows. Where is Suzanne?
In the days, weeks, and months after Suzanne Morphew was reported missing, on Mother's Day 2020, her trail went cold. But the mother of two's disappearance had become the biggest story in Colorado.
49-year-old Suzanne Morphew remains missing.
Home of a missing woman from Chaffee County is now being searched.
Teams are combing the terrain, even brought in boats to search the local waterways.
And we're going to fan out and we're going to work that area very carefully, okay?
4 months in, Suzanne's brother, Andrew Mormon, organized a citizen search. He said he felt he had to do something, anything.
I'd hoped to find her alive, and at some point, you have to realize when somebody's missing after so long that the chances of that diminish dramatically.
The thought that Suzanne may have been abducted hit the peaceful, picturesque town of Salida hard.
I came home every day, and my wife asked me, had they found her yet?
Dan Reidenauer has covered the story for his local morning show.
Hippie Radio 97.5 with Dan R. Good morning, 827 now.
Barry and Suzanne Morphew were not known well in Salida, Colorado. They had only been here for a couple of years.
Before moving to Colorado in 2018, Barry and Suzanne grew up in the small town of Alexandria, Indiana, where they met in high school. Suzanne competed for homecoming queen. Barry was a star baseball player who was drafted by the Toronto Blue Jays. Injury ended Barry's dreams of a major league career. They both attended Purdue University and married in 1994. He started a landscaping business. Suzanne taught middle school before becoming a full-time mother.
They had a couple of daughters, one in college, and they had a daughter in high school.
Macy, 16 years old when her mom disappeared, lived at home. Her sister Mallory attended college, and the Morphews told some friends they moved to a home just outside of Salida to be closer to their older daughter. But there were also rumblings about the state of the Morphews' marriage.
Maybe a new place, a new home, new scenery around them would strengthen their family and therefore strengthen their marriage.
But the move did not appear to improve the relationship. It was a tough time, says her sister, Melinda Mormon.
My sister had sent me a text message. It was very lengthy. It was very powerful. It was very revealing.
In this Zoom interview, Melinda said she received Suzanne's text 2 days before she disappeared, and it was boiling over with anger toward Barry. The text read in part, "He's also been abusive emotionally and physically. I feel more angry now, anger at what I've allowed."
Barry was very dominant in the relationship, and my sister was a very passive, gentle soul. He had a great tendency to overpower and intimidate people to get what he wanted.
And what kind of boss was he?
You know, he was real quiet, stern. He knew what he was doing because that's what he did in Indiana.
Cody Cox was part of Barry's landscaping crew for nearly 2 years when Barry first arrived in Colorado.
I talked pretty highly about Barry because I was with him all the time. He's like inspiration to me almost. He was a real cool guy.
Cody said he regularly heard Barry talking to Suzanne as they drove in Barry's truck.
They seemed to communicate pretty well. She is a sweetheart. She is a real kind lady. She's almost like an angel, like something you'd see off a Hallmark movie, you know, like real nice, almost too perfect. So when I heard about the news, I didn't believe it. I heard it actually on the radio. And I was like, did they just say Suzanne? And I was like, oh my gosh, who would even want to hurt her?
The first day authorities searched for Suzanne, they found her mountain bike close to the Morphew home.
Where was the mountain bike found?
It was found right over this little cliff right here, resting on these boulders. She was new at mountain biking, so an accident is certainly plausible. I would only ask, where's Suzanne?
She would have been injured, yeah?
She would have been injured.
Investigators believe the scene was staged, and days later, they discovered Suzanne's helmet roughly a mile away off Highway 50.
The helmet was found on the south side of the road.
This side of the road.
Which would be to our left.
So was the thought somebody threw it out of a window, perhaps?
That's the thinking, yes.
It appeared as though Suzanne could have been abducted, and that's when Barry made that public plea.
Please, we'll do whatever it takes to bring you back.
In those early days, Barry had a theory about what happened to Suzanne that he shared with Tyson Draper, who has his own YouTube channel. They happened to meet at the site where Suzanne's mountain bike was found, and Tyson secretly videotaped Barry.
The first night there was a mountain lion. The officer seen it walk by the car, so we thought maybe she got attacked by a lion.
A mountain lion killed her?
If that happened, there would have been signs of that. There would have been blood, there would have been struggle. So that was a very short-lived speculation.
Authorities began to doubt that Suzanne even took a bike ride, especially after her sunglasses and hydration backpack were found in her car. Investigators also found her driver's license and credit cards in her Range Rover, but her cell phone was missing.
Did Barry Morphew cooperate with investigators during the course of this?
He had been interviewed by investigators through the course of it, and he talked to investigators almost every time.
11 News reporter Ashley Franco is live at the Chaffee County Court.
Ashley Franco, who reported on the case for the CBS affiliate in Colorado Springs, has read the police documents, and she says Barry has repeatedly told the same story. He came home around 3 p.m. on May 9th, 2020, and had a pleasant evening with Suzanne. The next morning, Mother's Day, Barry says he drove to a job some 3 hours away.
He says the last time he sees his wife is when she's sleeping in their bed.
As investigators began trying to verify Barry's alibi, they were pulled in a new direction. Suzanne's spy pen had surfaced with that intimate conversation. Now they needed to figure out the identity of Jeff, Suzanne's lover.
Could this man have had something to do with Suzanne's disappearance?
It was just days after Suzanne Morphew went missing when investigators make that intriguing discovery.
They discover a spy pen.
A spy pen?
A spy pen.
Aya Gruber is a professor of law at the University of Colorado and a former defense attorney. She has closely studied all the public investigative files in the Morphew case. She knows it was not easy for investigators to find Suzanne's secret lover, a man named Jeff.
She hid that affair so well that it took agents 6 months to find the man she was having an affair with.
Jeff turned out to be Jeff Libler, and he had a wife and 6 children in Michigan, where he lived. He and Suzanne had a one-time fling after high school. Decades passed until Suzanne reached out to Jeff out of the blue in 2018.
When Suzanne and Barry moved to Colorado, Suzanne messaged him on Facebook.
And what did she message him?
Howdy, stranger. And from that moment, they had talked almost every single day, nonstop.
In the months after Suzanne went missing, Jeff kept quiet. He only began cooperating after he was located by investigators, who learned Jeff had taken steps to hide the nearly 2-year affair.
What he did was delete all his social media accounts that he had used to communicate with Suzanne. He's got a lot to lose if revelations of this affair come out.
Jeff told agents he only took those steps because he did not want to tarnish Suzanne's memory and worried he might lose his family and job. He was also worried agents considered him a suspect.
He asked the agents, "Am I a target?"
Although he did not come forward on his own, Jeff did assist agents after they found him. He agreed to provide access to his DNA, phone records, and his passwords for those deleted accounts. By looking through the couple's iCloud accounts and phone records, agents were able to piece together their relationship, including the times they met in person.
Investigators also found that Suzanne, on several instances, had gone on vacation to meet up with Jeff in many different states, ranging from Louisiana to Florida.
Investigators also discovered they'd sent intimate photos to each other, talked of becoming husband and wife, and even mentioned leaving the United States.
Jeff and Suzanne had talked about moving away, moving to Ecuador at one point.
If you were an investigator instead of a law professor, what would you want to know about this Jeff Libler?
Everything. I'd want to know everything about what he was doing, what he was thinking. Here is somebody who arguably had the last communication with Suzanne before she went missing.
The love affair between Suzanne and Jeff became a key part of the investigation as agents tried to figure out what happened to her on that Saturday, May 9th, the day before Mother's Day. Records show that Suzanne and Jeff messaged each other 59 times that day, much more than usual, authorities say. At one point, Suzanne sends Jeff this selfie. Investigators dub it her last proof of life photo. Barry was not home as the lovers' texts heat up. At 2:05 p.m., Suzanne writes, "I'm just in love with you. What you up to?" Jeff's response at 2:06 p.m., "Want to strip down and get naked? LOL." She responds by saying she'll load up her WhatsApp account, and then at 2:11, Suzanne writes, "Okay, I'm on WA." Then, at 2:26 p.m., Suzanne gets a text from Barry that he's heading home. Done, headed back. No one knows if Suzanne saw that text or was preoccupied with Jeff, but she does not answer. Barry follows up, appearing to wonder where Suzanne is. "Did you leave?" There was still no response from Suzanne, and investigators speculate the next few moments are when Barry returned home. They notice that Barry's cell phone appears to be pinging all around the outside of his house. Was he chasing Suzanne before a final and fatal confrontation? Investigators asked Barry to explain that unusual phone activity.
And he says, "Well, let me think about that. I was probably walking around my house shooting chipmunks."
You heard right. It was perhaps the world's first chipmunk alibi. Barry says the chipmunks were a constant nuisance at his house, and he'd been running around shooting them that day.
And then that confession to shooting chipmunks becomes a major piece of incriminating evidence against him.
There was no evidence of any chipmunk shootings around Barry's house. Part of his problem, Aya says, is that Barry granted between 30 and 40 interviews, all without a lawyer, to everyone from a county detective to members of the FBI.
Would you have allowed him to do all these interviews?
No, absolutely not.
Meanwhile, Jeff Libler was cleared. He told agents he was in Michigan that weekend and his alibi checked out. When investigators tell Barry of the affair, he denies knowing anything about it. But if Barry knew nothing about Suzanne's affair, what motive would he have to kill her? One clue may be a deleted text that investigators found on Barry's phone, sent by Suzanne just days before. "I'm done. I could care less what you're up to and have been for years. We just need to figure this out civilly."
So the only thing that makes sense is that Barry Morphew lost it when Suzanne finally said, "I'm leaving you."
Barry knew that his daughters would be away on their camping trip that Saturday afternoon, and authorities say he took advantage of that opportunity to kill Suzanne and clean up the crime scene.
From 2:47 p.m. until 10:17 p.m., just under 8 hours, Barry's phone goes into airplane mode. What do authorities believe was happening during that time?
Authorities say that they believe when his phone went into airplane mode that he was disposing of possible evidence.
Unable to track Barry's cell phone, investigators tapped into a relatively new investigative technique, digital vehicle forensics, to pull a stream of data out of Barry's Ford truck. And Barry's truck told a different story than what he was telling investigators.
They were using Barry's own car against him.
Ben Lemire is an expert in the new field of vehicle forensics.
Give me a sense of how your technology from your company helps solve criminal cases.
So a lot of times it's used to, locate bodies.
Lemire is the CEO of the Burla Corporation.
Helps get people convicted. It's helped get people not convicted.
Investigators from Scotland Yard to the FBI have learned how to use Burla's software to tap into the dozens of computers in a car.
It's accurate enough to be used as evidence in court cases, correct?
Yes, sir. It's used every day in cases around the world.
Cases like the disappearance of Suzanne Morphew. Investigators created a Burla report, meaning they tapped into the data in Barry's Ford truck to track its movements after his cell phone went into airplane mode.
A couple of the pieces of evidence that I think are very harmful to his case come from the data in the car.
The prosecution's case is that Barry snapped at one point, the day before Mother's Day.
Authorities believe Barry killed Suzanne that afternoon. He told agents he went to bed around 8 p.m. that night, but the data pulled from the truck shows that the truck was put in reverse and moved some 96 feet closer to his house around 9:30 p.m.
Investigators think that's when he could have loaded Suzanne's body.
Initially, Barry told police that he set his alarm for 4:30 a.m. on Mother's Day and left the house by 5 to drive to a job site in Broomfield, a town near Denver 150 miles from Salida. But the truck's computers show that someone was opening and closing the truck's doors around 3:30 a.m. Investigators believe Barry began driving toward Broomfield much earlier than he claimed. But there is a 4-hour window, approximately 4 a.m. to 8 a.m., when no activity was recorded by the vehicle's computers.
There are events in the car that aren't recorded, so they can't give sort of a full chronological picture.
And if Barry hid Suzanne's body during that 4-hour window, the truck's data does not provide answers.
Why is data missing sometimes?
Well, it gets overwritten. It is a computer, and, log files, they only last so long.
But Barry helped fill in some of the missing data. He told agents he took a left upon leaving his home instead of a right because even though it was dark, he remembered seeing some elk.
He saw a herd of elk, and he's a hunter, so he was interested, and he wanted to get an up-close look.
That admission was significant to agents because it put him in an area where a key piece of evidence had been recovered.
Investigators found Suzanne's bike helmet up that road, so they believe at that point when he turned left instead of turning right that he could have been ditching her bike helmet.
At 8:10 on Mother's Day morning, the truck's computers again began recording data. And by then, Barry's cell phone had also come back to life. Agents are able to track Barry's cell and truck movements and can see that he first pulled over at this Broomfield bus stop where he discarded something in a garbage can.
And then he moves on to a hotel trash can, a McDonald's trash can, a dumpster in a Men's Warehouse parking lot, and then back to the hotel and dump stuff in a dumpster there. Investigators believe that during these trash runs, he was disposing of evidence in different places within the Denver area.
This is a surveillance shot of Barry on one of those trash runs, but investigators could not see what he was throwing away. It may have looked incriminating, but Barry claims it was just another day at the office. He told agents he was merely being cheap, not criminal.
And his claim, well, I just always have a lot of junk in the vehicle. I don't like to pay to have it disposed at a landfill. This is just what I do.
But it's suspicious that you would go to 5 different trash areas to dispose of several things. Why not just do it at one?
After checking out the work site, Barry headed back to his room at the Holiday Inn. And investigators say he stayed there from 12:42 to 6:03 p.m. By then, he'd already spoken to older daughter Mallory, who told him she could not get in touch with her mother. That's when the Morphew neighbors were contacted and could find no sign of Suzanne.
Barry asked them at that time if the bike was there to go check on her. Her bicycle is not here.
Barry asked his neighbor to call 911.
And that's when the call to 911 was placed that Suzanne is missing.
Barry doesn't head home immediately, and he is dropping some tools off for his coworkers.
Tools including a shovel. With Suzanne now officially reported missing, Barry tells his workers there's a family emergency and arranges hotel rooms with one of those workers taking over Barry's room.
When the employee was interviewed, he told investigators that the room that Barry checked out of, it had a strong smell of chlorine or bleach.
Which suggests what?
That he could be cleaning up a crime scene.
Just after 6 p.m., Barry starts driving back to Salida. On the way, Barry speaks to sheriff's deputies who advise him they found Suzanne's bike, and he arrives at that ravine at around 8:40 p.m.
And investigators say that when he arrived there, he was pretty emotional for a few minutes.
By Sunday night, Suzanne's daughters were back home, but Suzanne is nowhere to be found.
No questions asked, however much they want.
Barry offered a $100,000 reward for information that was later doubled to $200,000. Investigators later discovered many texts from Suzanne to a close friend that apparently revealed her tormented feelings about Barry. He won't speak of divorce. I feel no peace when he's here. I wouldn't feel safe alone with him. Barry became the prime suspect, and investigators think they know how he killed Suzanne.
The large Morphew home remains sealed off.
While investigators searched the Morphew home and the family's cars and trucks, Barry continued to talk seemingly to anyone with a badge. Weeks and months went by, and Barry remained at the center of the investigation.
Police are absolutely correct, as a statistical matter, to look at intimate partners when they suspect that a woman might have been harmed or murdered.
It's something like 8 out of 10 times when a spouse dies, the other one's involved.
Absolutely.
Sometimes the smallest item will turn an investigation. And in this case, agents seized on this clear plastic cap that a forensics team had found in the family's dryer. Prosecutors believe the cap was from a syringe used to fill a tranquilizer dart.
How do prosecutors interpret that?
The prosecution's theory is that at some point, when Barry came home on the 9th and snapped and decided to murder Suzanne, he used a tranquilizer dart that you would use on animals.
There was no working tranquilizer rifle found in the Morphew's home, but Barry told investigators he was an experienced tranquilizer dart gun shooter. He knew how to load darts with paralyzing chemicals, having used them to illegally sedate deer and remove their antlers to sell. This is a photo of the inside of Barry's garage, with his collection of deer heads and a pile of antlers. We asked Dan Reidenauer to read some of what Barry told investigators.
Barry said, the first thing I thought of when I came here and saw deer in my yard with big horns, I'm getting them horns. And I'll tell you exactly what I did. I shoot them. They go to sleep. I cut their horns off. It's totally illegal, but you're going to find tranq darts around my property because I've done that.
Experts say it can take between 4 and 20 minutes for an animal the size of a deer to drop after being shot with a tranquilizer dart. Agents theorized that Barry's phone had pinged from various locations around the house, not because he was shooting chipmunks, but because he was chasing Suzanne after he shot her.
And what are you holding?
What I'm holding is a Teledart model 706 rifle. They use this a lot in parks throughout the country.
Andrew Caters, owner and CEO of Animal Care and Equipment Services, showed us a tranquilizer rifle he'd typically use on animals.
So if Suzanne had been struck by one of these darts,
It's right here.
would she have time to run around, try to escape?
She could, but I don't think she would get very far.
For a human being, it could be lethal.
For sure.
Bolstering the theory that Barry and Suzanne had a confrontation the day she disappeared were apparent scratches seen on Barry's left arm. Agents took the circumstantial evidence they gathered, Barry's apparent suspicious behavior, his contradictory statements, the puzzling data from his truck, Suzanne's disturbing texts, and those 5 trash runs, and brought it all to the district attorney. On nearly the anniversary of Suzanne's disappearance, Barry is arrested.
The moment captured on a cell phone by a passerby.
In May 2021.
Tonight, the husband of Suzanne Morphew is behind bars, accused of killing her. The Chaffee County Sheriff says Barry Morphew was arrested this morning.
Suzanne's body has never been found, and prosecutors assume she's dead.
Despite the lack of a body, Barry was charged with first-degree murder, tampering with physical evidence, and a variety of other allegations. He was held without bail and eventually pleaded not guilty. In their arrest affidavit, prosecutors spelled out what they believe happened to Suzanne. It had become clear that Barry could not control Suzanne's insistence on leaving him, and he resorted to something he has done his entire life: hunt and control Suzanne like he had hunted and controlled animals. Suzanne's sister Melinda reacted to the news of Barry's arrest.
There are no winners in this story. There are 2 families who are suffering deeply.
Barry ultimately hired high-profile lawyers from Denver, and in the summer of 2021, Judge Patrick Murphy heard the prosecution's evidence in open court.
He decided to hold a preliminary hearing to see if this case had enough evidence to go to trial.
The defense tried mightily to blunt the state's case, countering that the clear plastic cap found in the dryer means nothing, because no one could say how long it had been there. Furthermore, Barry's DNA was not found on that cap. And as for that chlorine smell in Barry's hotel room,
one of the managers from the Holiday Inn had actually communicated to agents that this smell of chlorine existed before Barry Morphew was there because that room's directly above an indoor pool.
And there was one more crucial issue the prosecution had to deal with, one that its own forensic team uncovered. DNA evidence made public for the first time now threatened to destroy the case against Barry.
This DNA discovery is so significant. The agents swabbed the inside of Suzanne Morphew's car, and they found male DNA on the glove box. And it wasn't Barry Morphew's DNA. He was eliminated.
The DNA also did not match Suzanne's lover, Jeff Libler.
But it was a partial match to the DNA of an unknown male who had attacked other women, and it raised a disturbing question. Had Suzanne fallen into the hands of a sexual predator?
In September 2021, at the Chaffee County Courthouse in Salida, Judge Patrick Murphy heard arguments about whether there was enough evidence to try Barry Morphew for murder.
The judge named off 3 different scenarios, saying Suzanne Morphew left willingly, Barry Morphew could have killed his wife, or someone else abducted Suzanne and killed her.
He said it was unlikely Suzanne had run off on her own, even though she and lover Jeff Libler had discussed moving to Ecuador.
The judge says that because of the evidence that's been presented about how loving Suzanne was toward her daughters and toward her family, that she could never do that.
But the abduction theory could not be so easily dismissed, especially after that mysterious DNA was found in Suzanne's Range Rover. Investigators learned that DNA at least partially matched the profile of an unnamed man connected to 3 unsolved sexual assault cases in Tempe, Phoenix, and Chicago.
So how can that DNA end up in her car?
Well, that DNA can end up in her car if she was the victim, for example, of a serial killer, or there could also be potentially an innocent explanation. But it is very, very curious.
Barry Morphew can stand up and say, I'm not your killer. The man whose DNA is in my wife's car, tied to past sexual assaults, that's your killer.
Barry Morphew absolutely could say that, and that's what his defense is banking on in this case.
In frank language, Judge Murphy gave his opinion of the state's evidence. I find that the proof is not evident, nor is the presumption great that Mr. Morphew committed first-degree murder. Despite that, the judge ruled there was probable cause to go to trial.
But this judge was very careful to say, look, I'm finding probable cause here, but it's only because I am looking at all the evidence in the light most favorable to the prosecution.
At that point, Barry had spent months in jail.
The judge says $500,000 cash only bond.
And are they monitoring him in some fashion?
Barry Morphew is wearing an ankle monitor for them to track him to make sure that he is staying in Chaffee County.
A few days later, on September 20th, 2021, Barry Morphew and daughters Mallory and Macy are all smiles as they leave the jail.
Barry, how does it feel?
How does it feel to be out?
They stand firmly behind their dad. Barry declined our request for an interview. Barry Morphew's homicide trial was to begin on April 28, 2022. But in the months leading up to that date, Judge Murphy recused himself, and Judge Ramsey Lama replaced him. And Barry's defense team, led by attorney Iris Eaton, filed motions asking that prosecutors be sanctioned for failing to produce discovery in a timely manner, including some potentially exculpatory evidence, like the male DNA found in Suzanne's Range Rover.
There's DNA that is placed on all the critical items of evidence in this case, on the bike helmet, in the house, in the car, that is linked to unknown males.
In April 2022, Judge Lama ruled that prosecutors repeatedly had missed deadlines and had failed to turn over important information in the discovery phase. The judge wrote that while he did not find those actions, quote, willful, the court does find this pattern to be negligent, bordering on reckless, unquote. The judge's penalty was to knock out 14 prosecution witnesses, including experts in DNA and cell phone and vehicle data recovery. They would not, he said, be allowed to testify.
This case is incredibly unique.
Law professor Aya Gruber said the case was going to be an uphill battle for prosecutors even before she heard about the most recent sanctions.
There are not many murder cases where the defendant has been charged with first-degree murder, where there is no body, no blood evidence of any foul play, no eyewitnesses.
On April 19th, 2022, as a pretrial hearing was about to begin, District Attorney Linda Stanley filed a motion to dismiss the murder charges against Barry Morphew without prejudice, meaning the case could be refiled at a later date. In her motion, the DA pointed to the court's decision to bar several key witnesses. Without this crucial evidence and without the victim's body, the people cannot move forward at this time in good faith. Neither Barry, his daughters, nor his lawyer had any advance warning.
I didn't know a dismissal was coming today, although the writing was on the wall.
In her motion for dismissal, DA Stanley told the judge that officials believe investigators are close to discovering the location of Suzanne Morphew's body. Court papers specifically mention a remote and mountainous region nearby the Morphew residence that will be excavated after 5 feet of snow melts.
Where is Suzanne Morphew's body? That is the million-dollar question.
Remember, there was an approximate 4-hour gap not recorded by the computers in Barry's truck on Mother's Day morning, 2020. Whether investigators ultimately were able to recover some of that missing data or received a tip about the location of Suzanne's remains is not known.
The San Isabel National Forest, again, is 1.1 million acres. There's plenty of places to dispose of the body.
Defense attorney Eaton denies Barry has any involvement in his wife's disappearance.
Barry Morphew loves Suzanne Morphew. He loves her and he misses her and he wants to know where Suzanne Morphew is.
After the judge granted the motion to dismiss homicide charges against Barry, he walked out of court a free man, flanked as usual by his loyal daughters. Suzanne's sister Melinda says she agrees with the request to dismiss charges against Barry at this point. She said she hoped that with more time, searchers will find Suzanne's body and win a solid conviction in her murder. This would dispel all rumors of her whereabouts. And whatever else happens with the case, Melinda says she hopes her nieces keep one thing in mind.
Mallory and Macy, your mother would have laid down her life for you girls. She would never leave you. She would never forsake you. She loved you with her whole being.
Hours. Don't miss an episode.
Did you have anything to do with the death of your wife, Corey?
I did not.
2 minutes.
I'm with the CBS affiliate in Quincy, so we've been covering this from day one.
I was a journalist in Quincy for 25 years, and I'm now writing a book on the case.
Saves the touchdown.
Curtis Lovelace was a center on the Quincy High football team.
The offensive line, Kurt Lovelace.
Went to the University of Illinois. He became an all-Big Ten center.
Well, we're just underway.
I think we all understand the concept of the play more than the past.
He was hired in the Adams County State's Attorney's Office as an assistant state's attorney.
She was a beautiful, blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman, thin, perfect face. Essentially what it was, it's you have like the star football player dating the cheerleader. That's what Corey and Curtis were.
And then they get married and they have these kids.
Everybody thinking he had it all.
Do you have good memories of any of the time together?
I do. There were good times and bad. I mean, it wasn't a perfect marriage.
On Valentine's Day 2006, Curtis Lovelace found his wife Corey dead in the bedroom of their home on Kentucky Street in Quincy.
What was your reaction?
Just utter shock, just not knowing what to do.
At what point does it change from being this blissful, storybook relationship to death on Valentine's Day.
I think the volatility, sort of built over time. It did escalate to a point where there was a lot of gossip in the community about him. The case was quickly closed. There was no determination for a cause of death, and Curtis went on with his life.
That's when the Quincy gossip mill got started going. People wanted to know what happened to her.
I was sitting in my newsroom and got the call, and they said, sounds like Curtis Lovelace has been arrested.
Curtis Lovelace was arrested this afternoon.
Lovelace is accused of suffocating his former wife, Corey Lovelace, in 2000.
We begin tonight with the start of the Curtis Lovelace murder trial.
To not only be called a murderer, but to say that I murdered the mother of my children, it's horrible. This is a prosecution that should have never been brought. There never should have been an indictment.
Breaking news here inside the Adams County Courthouse. Judge Hardwick did just now declare a mistrial.
It's set for retrial, and we plan to retry it.
Here we are again, the beginning of another Lovelace trial, the retrial. We're a year after the first one.
Defendant's first wife, Corey Lovelace, was suffocated. That will be our medical evidence. In the age of supposed fake news, this is a fake case and there are fake witnesses. No evidence of any homicide.
Jenny, what do you see as the big difference this time around?
Lovelace's second wife, Erica Gomez, as we know, she was banned from this first trial. She is the biggest difference in this case. A lot of people saying that she was the missing puzzle piece to why we're even here to begin with.
Come up here and be sworn.
May 2012 is the first time that he attacked me. He ripped my shirt and he tried to grab me again, and I kept on trying to fight him off. The children were called down to stop me from calling the police.
They were lies. I told him multiple times that I had nothing to do with Corey's death.
So how do you find yourself in this position?
It's a good question, and it's a question that we've been asking for the last 2.5 years.
The way I describe circumstantial evidence is as follows. I like to look at it as pebbles in a mosaic. And you're going to step away from that mosaic. And you know what it's going to say? Murder. The opening statements are about what the evidence is going to show. The state had an opportunity to explain to you what evidence they have that Kurt Lovelace murdered his wife, Corey Lovelace. And they didn't present it. Because there is none.
For Curtis Lovelace and his family, February 14th, 2006 might seem like a long time ago. But for the second time in 2 years, the husband and children of Corey Lovelace are about to relive those difficult days after she died with yet another murder trial. This time it's in a different courthouse, in a different city. But first, you need to know how this all started. It's Friday night in Quincy, Illinois. And hundreds have come out for the home team. Local journalist Bob Goff swaps his keyboard for a microphone and moonlights as an announcer.
Your halftime score, Quincy 28.
If you're a local sports star, people are always wanting to know about you.
And at Quincy High in the 80s, there was no bigger star than Blue Devils Hall of Famer Curtis Lovelace, both on the field and in the classroom.
Curtis Lovelace was a very hard-working kid, smart kid.
The University of Illinois gave Lovelace, number 54, a scholarship to play football. But he wasn't just any player. Lovelace, a business administration major, was considered one of the top offensive linemen in the Big Ten. A team captain who led the Fighting Illini to the conference championship his senior year.
He even got a look in free agent camp in the NFL with the Patriots. Had a bad knee injury, which not sure if he would have made it or not, but that certainly didn't help the situation. But being a smart kid, you know, Curtis Lovelace already had other goals in mind.
While still in college, Curtis started a long-distance relationship with high school classmate Corey Diedrichson, who was studying communications at the University of Iowa.
She just had a perfect smile.
Marty Diedrichson, Corey's mother, spoke to our CBS affiliate, KHQA.
And she just smiled at everybody, and she just did stuff.
Corey was vibrant, dynamic, a little bit of stubbornness, and she was a pistol, and I loved her for that.
Steve Belko, Beth Dobrisky, and Brett Schrader grew up with Corey and Curtis in Quincy.
Kurt was easygoing. He was a gentleman, fun-loving, intelligent, a gentleman.
Did you think they were well matched?
I did. They looked great together. They had a lot of similarities, and they seemed to have fun together.
In 1991, just 1 year after graduation, they were married. Steve was Kurt's best man, and Beth was Corey's bridesmaid.
It was one of the best days, you know, in our lives.
They were very happy. The pictures you could see on their faces. It was a magical night.
With Corey by his side, Lovelace had grand plans. He attended law school and eventually became an assistant state's attorney in the city they both loved, Quincy.
What did Corey want to do with her life? What were her dreams?
Corey was all about family. She wanted the big family, the happy marriage, being involved in Quincy.
Corey's dream came true in 1993 when their first child, Lindsay, was born.
What are you doing, Lindsay? That's an ugly dog you got there.
And continued with the addition of 3 sons.
Come on,
Logan.
Lindsay. Logan, say something.
He's so screaming.
Lincoln.
Hey, Lincoln, smile.
And Larson. Lindsay is now in her 20s.
She was a loving person. She was involved, headroom mother, PTA, always there at our games, dance recitals, everything. Our #1 cheerleader.
Do you have a fondest memory of her?
I always say dancing to ABBA in the kitchen. She always played ABBA and we always sang along and twirling around, and it was just special, and I still listen because it's everything to me.
And Curtis continued to chase his dreams as well. In 2005, while still at the state's attorney's office, he started his own law firm. And as if he wasn't busy enough, Lovelace was elected president of the school board, became a captain in the Illinois National Guard, and an adjunct professor at Quincy University.
Big man on campus, and he always kind of had that air about him.
Was he arrogant?
He became arrogant more and more. Yes, there was a little bit of holier than thou. Maybe you were entitled to this living. I think he lost friends over time because of that.
And the situation at home was changing as well. Curtis's working long hours away from Corey and the kids was taking a toll on their personal life.
They fought at a young age. I thought it was normal. But then growing up later on after she was gone, I realized that it wasn't normal.
Neighbors around the Lovelace house here on Kentucky Street say that in the months leading up to her death, they had heard loud and contentious arguments between Corey and Curtis. By many accounts, both were heavy drinkers. And in this small community, it was known that at times there was a tremendous amount of turmoil in their home.
I knew that she wasn't taking care of herself.
Corey's family acknowledges she was suffering with an eating disorder, bulimia.
I was aware of the bulimia, binging and the purging late in the day. Corey was an alcoholic, and unfortunately, so much of alcoholism, all of alcoholism, is not is not pretty. It's ugly, and it brings out oftentimes the worst in people, and it was something that she struggled with.
You said you drank. Would you describe yourself as an alcoholic?
I do describe myself as an alcoholic, and I stopped drinking.
Was Corey's death the result of her alcohol abuse, or was it murder? It was a question that would go unanswered for almost 8 years, until a rookie detective would take a new look at this old case.
That's when I went to the chief and asked him if I could take a look at it again.
And when you saw the pictures, what was your first reaction?
It did not appear to me that that could have been a natural death. I was at the office just reading old case files, and the Loveless case popped into my head.
In 2014, Adam Gibson, as a newly promoted detective, decided to take a look at a file of a case he'd always been curious about: the death of Corey Loveless 8 years earlier, a death ruled as undetermined.
After seeing the photos, that's when I went to the chief and asked him if I could take a look at it again.
The photos of Corey's body show her arms slightly elevated above her chest.
It didn't really make sense, and there was no real explanation for him.
In reopening the case, Gibson first consulted Adams County Coroner James Keller, who was the deputy coroner in 2006, when he was called to the Loveless house the morning of February 14th.
Upon entering the bedroom, I noticed the female lying on the bed on her back with her hands kind of in an upright position. A body always tells a story the way you find them.
What is the story that Corey's body was telling you?
That she had passed earlier that prior evening or day.
Gibson contacted Dr. Jane Turner, an assistant medical examiner in St. Louis, who agreed with Keller's assessment that Corey's body had stiffened, a condition called rigor mortis, which only happens over an extended period of time.
In my report, I stated 10 to 12 hours. Rigor mortis develops maximally at 12 hours.
And it was the position of Corey's arms that led Dr. Turner to the theory that Corey had been suffocated.
What did you determine would have caused the suffocation?
Well, with the position of the hands, it suggests that there was an object between her hands and her body. And it appears that there's a pillow missing. So I suppose that a pillow was used to suffocate her.
Turner theorized that the pillow had not been removed until much later,
her hands,
after Corey's arms had frozen around it, that her dead body had laid in bed all night. Gibson and Turner's theory of murder was a very different account than the one Curtis Loveless gave police. Curtis says it all started the weekend before Valentine's Day.
She had become ill. She appeared to have the flu.
Curtis insists Corey was very much alive that morning.
The vivid memory is her coming down. One of the kids needed a pair of pants. She wasn't feeling any better, and we made the decision that I would take the kids to school.
4-year-old Larson stayed home while Curtis dropped off the other kids. Larson would later tell police that on that morning, he couldn't wake Mommy up. Frightened, he waited at the top of the stairs for his dad. By 9 a.m., Curtis returned, and that's when he found Corey dead in their bed.
What was your reaction?
Just utter shock. In fact, I'm not even sure how I reacted. I know what I did.
Oddly, Curtis did not react by calling 911.
What I saw was someone who didn't need help. I just saw my wife who had passed away.
Loveless says at that moment, his main concern was to get his youngest child, Larson, out of the house. At trial, Corey's mother, Marty, testifies that Curtis brought him over to her house, which was just around the corner.
Sometime after 9, Curtis knocks on the door, and he asked if I would watch Larson. So I take Larson, and he turns and he said, "Oh, and by the way, Corey's dead."
And then what did Mr. Lovelace do?
He turned to leave. And I'm trying to think, I think I remember the fact that on the way I said, "I want to go," and he said, "Everything's been taken care of," and he left.
Did he stay there and
No.
explain to you
No.
what he knew?
No.
Nothing?
No.
Did you have anything to do with the death of your wife, Corey?
I did not.
But Detective Gibson wasn't buying it. His investigation would lead to an indictment,
Curtis Lovelace was arrested
an
this
arrest,
afternoon in connection
and Curtis Lovelace's first trial, 10 years after his wife's death.
Following breaking news outside of the Adams County Courthouse where a mistrial has been declared.
The jury deadlocked, unable to decide if Corey was murdered.
How does it feel to be released finally?
Curtis Lovelace was out of jail. But for how long? 1 year later, a new trial.
Very dramatic day today here in the Sangamon County
A new jury, but the same question. Did Corey die from alcohol abuse or something more sinister?
Thanks, Ryan. Good to see you, folks.
The second trial would be the culmination of events that began 11 years ago that Valentine's Day morning.
She was laying in the bed, and her arms were drawn up by her chest.
The grim details of that morning would be embedded in the minds of those who were there. EMT Cole Miller was among the first on the scene.
I went in there to check for signs of life and checked her carotid pulse in her neck and then checked her wrist and saw that it was cold and stiff.
I'm Jeff Baird.
Baird was the lead detective in the case in 2006.
You determined that this investigation should be closed because there was no evidence of fraud.
That is what we determined.
Defense attorney John Lovey asks him to describe the scene.
Did you find anything whatsoever that seemed consistent with any kind of struggle?
No.
Did you find any evidence of a homicide?
No.
No signs of homicide because the cause of death was ruled undetermined.
Were you surprised she came back with undetermined?
I think it was unexpected. I was expecting to see a death from natural causes related to a health condition.
Baird also didn't expect to see, on the day he discovered Corey, the condition of her hands and arms.
Her arms were up in an unnatural position. Her hands and arms, from the elbow to the hands, were leaning or resting against her abdomen and appeared to be up.
It is this strange position of Corey's arms that would become a critical and controversial piece of this case.
There was mild rigor in one of her arms and moderate rigor in the other. Rigor was also forming in her legs.
Let's be real clear. Were her arms still pliable at 10:15?
Yes.
Tell the jury what pliable means.
We could move them.
The defense argues if Corey's arms were pliable, it would indicate she could have died that morning. And that is in direct contrast to James Keller's testimony.
The body was in a full state of rigor mortis.
However long Corey Lovelace had been dead, to Keller, it certainly appeared that medical rigor mortis had set in.
The state of rigor mortis to get in that position, generally the rule of thumb of anywhere from 8 to 12 hours.
Did it make any sense to you that they were saying it was that morning?
It did not. It just didn't seem to add up.
2 days after Corey's death, her body was cremated, and the case was closed. A 38-year-old woman was suddenly dead for seemingly no apparent reason.
We assumed that her eating disorder, that her alcoholism somehow caused her death, and whether it was checked undetermined or natural death really wasn't something that we were concerned about.
Life went on. 6 months later, Loveless started dating Erica Gomez, who he later married. Gomez would become an explosive figure in his second trial.
His parents knew that he was abusive. That's why they came and got him. His parents probably knew that he killed his first wife.
After his wife Corey mysteriously passed away in 2006, it took Curtis Loveless less than 6 months to find love again, this time with one of his students at Quincy University, Erica Gomez.
I remember my dad coming up to me and saying, "Hey, just so you know, I've been seeing this woman."
And what was your reaction?
I was shocked, but couldn't process it at the same time because what 12-year-old's gonna process a parent dating, especially so quickly after the loss.
And looking back, it was, I think, properly characterized as a rebound relationship. I regret starting the relationship.
Were you lonely?
Absolutely.
2 years later, Loveless and Gomez were married.
What was your relationship like with Erica?
Not good at all. For some reason, there was some hatred towards my mom, like she was public enemy #1. So I would tell her to stop, like it's not fair. And then I would get punished for that.
By whom?
By Erica. And what scared me more was that my dad would sit there and watch it.
It didn't take long for things to go from bad to much worse.
It was Christmas Eve, and my mom's side of the family invited all of us to come for family dinner. Christmas was my mom's favorite holiday. And I was crying because I missed her and I wanted her there. And all of a sudden, Erica walks in and says, "We're leaving now." So I get 3 to 5 minutes to calm down, get ready, go to walk out the door, find out that my dad, Erica, the boys had left. My family was not happy with them leaving me, and that set off a bomb.
A bomb that blew her family apart.
It blew up to the point where when I returned home that evening, Ms. Gomez was throwing Lindsay's stuff out of the house.
My clothes were in the street. My room is completely trashed. I knew my life was never going to be normal ever again.
And that's when you moved in with your mom's mom?
Yeah.
Loveless and Gomez divorced in 2013.
I decided that I'd made a poor decision and tried to end that relationship as peacefully and as amicably as possible. Unfortunately, it just didn't end as peacefully and amicably as it should have.
On the stand in front of the jury, Erica gave the courtroom a sample of her explosive personality.
He threatened me, he controlled me. He is physically abusive to me.
Hurling a variety of accusations against Loveless.
I've watched him get rid of evidence. I've watched him use his children to get rid of evidence. He used my social security number to try and steal money out of my account. He sexually assaulted me.
Did you have any concern that they would buy into what she was saying?
I didn't have that concern because I knew they were lies.
He was poisoning me. My hair was falling out with the white lines on my fingers. I was extremely sick. I had to.
You were aware, Ms. Gomez, that you were not supposed to mention that because there was no evidence to support it.
While Gomez was a witness for the prosecution, ultimately her testimony may have done more for the defense.
I had a hard time believing that the prosecution actually wanted to put her on the stand.
Also in the courtroom, Curtis Loveless's third wife, Christine, who, like Corey, Curtis knew from Quincy High. They were married in 2013, just months after his divorce from Gomez.
The behavior was so outlandish. The accusations were so outlandish. The fake tears.
The children were called down to stop me from calling the police.
So you felt that the jury would have zero credibility with it?
Absolutely.
On the stand for the prosecution, Detective Adam Gibson would have to defend his credibility and explain just how he found an expert to support his belief that Corey was murdered.
It's been implied that you did some doctor shopping.
Yes,
Do you think that's what you did?
absolutely not.
Remember, Dr. Jane Turner sided with Detective Gibson. After studying the evidence, Turner believed that Corey had died the night before police arrived.
Given the circumstances of the state in which her body was found and the altered scene, that it appears that she did die of a homicide from suffocation.
A logical conclusion, except for the fact that when questioned by Quincy police, the Loveless children, except Larson, said they saw their mother alive on the stairs before going off to school the morning Gibson believed Corey was already dead.
When Adam Gibson came to speak to you and he asked you, do you remember? You told him that you did. You remembered seeing her that morning.
And you came to believe that the children were wrong, correct?
I didn't say they were wrong. I don't know what they saw.
And maybe neither did they.
I had a story in my head of I saw her sitting on the stairs, waving to us, goodbye, I love you, left. And I always said, oh, it was great, I got to say I love you.
Do you remember seeing your mother that Valentine's Day morning?
It's a black hole.
You don't know?
No.
How certain are you now that Curtis Loveless murdered his wife, Corey?
I'm 100% certain.
But defense attorney John Lovey was about to challenge everything Detective Adam Gibson believed about the death of Corey Loveless.
Adam Gibson decided to create a crime where one didn't exist.
You knew that the case had been closed because nobody found sufficient evidence of a homicide, correct?
I read that it was closed, yes.
Prosecutor Ed Parkinson brings in 3 forensic pathologists to prove Detective Gibson's theory that Corey was murdered. From world-renowned doctor Werner Spitz
Miss Lovelace died, in my view, of suffocation.
to Dr. Scott Denton, the pathologist first consulted when the case was reopened.
I would determine her cause of death to be suffocation.
And finally, to Dr. Jane Turner, the out-of-state expert who also believes Corey was suffocated. Defense attorney Lovey tries to discredit Turner, saying she never saw Corey's body, and her opinion that Corey's body was in full rigor mortis conflicts with the first responders on the scene.
For you to be right, Jeff Baird has to be wrong about his assessment, correct? That's correct, right?
Yes.
Right. For you to be right, paramedic Ballard has to be wrong about his assessment that the arms were still pliable, correct?
Yes.
If Corey Loveless's body was pliable, as the defense claims, full rigor mortis had not set in, and she did not die the night before.
Whenever you're ready, prosecution.
When Coroner Keller is cross-examined, Lovey belittles his role in the case.
You were at the scene of Corey's death for all of 5 minutes, correct, sir?
Probably, yes, sir.
Lovey comes down hardest on Detective Gibson.
You continue to pursue Mr. Lovelace, all right, because you had already decided that this man must be guilty.
No.
He grills Gibson about rigor mortis.
At what point did you learn that you were wrong, that the body was in full rigor at the scene?
I don't know to this day that I'm wrong.
I'm going to show you a copy.
Then a new twist. Lovey accuses Gibson of withholding evidence, emails that never made it into the first trial.
You did delete all your emails in January 2015, did you not?
Yes.
The defense was able to recover those emails. Lovey reads one email from a pathologist who told Gibson he could never make a good murder case since Corey's death had originally been ruled undetermined.
That is more than reasonable doubt in any reasonable person's mind. All right, this email should have been turned over, right?
I believe so. It should, yes.
You didn't turn it over, did you?
I did not.
But Gibson testified that he never engaged in any intentional wrongdoing.
Have you ever intentionally deleted or modified emails to manipulate an investigation?
No.
All right, this time we call Dr. William Oliver.
Lovey calls to the stand his own noted pathologist, Dr. William Oliver, who was on the O.J. Simpson case. Oliver had no doubt how Corey died.
It is my opinion that she died of the complication of alcohol withdrawal known as acute fatty liver.
After a battle of the experts,
Your Honor, at this time, the defense calls the defendant.
the defense gambles that the most believable witness might be the accused killer himself.
As I approached the bed, I could see her hands. I could see her eyes were open, and she was very pale, and there was nothing there. Corey was dead. That's what I saw. That's what I saw. I told him multiple times that I had nothing to do with Corey's death.
Of course, being accused of a cold-blooded murder of your wife, that reduces your liability factor, correct?
A little bit.
Do you feel like everything you said, every decision you made, is now being picked over and twisted unfairly, you say?
We've been doing this for 2.5 years.
And it was remembering the time right after Corey died that Curtis became most emotional.
One of our high school classmates, who was a pastor, he's the one that delivered the eulogy. I wrote it, but I couldn't deliver it.
All three Loveless boys continue to support their father. The two oldest testified they saw their mother that Valentine's morning.
I remember getting ready for school, walking back and forth, getting stuff done, sitting on the stairs with my mother, and heading out the door.
How confident are you, though, from your memory itself, that you saw your mother alive?
100%.
Was this the last time you ever saw your mother alive?
Yes.
Their sister Lindsay was not called to testify by either side. As the trial goes to final arguments,
Beyond a reasonable doubt, ladies and gentlemen, is the standard. Those words don't have a dictionary definition. You're all going to have to apply to your life experiences. Beyond a reasonable doubt. Doesn't mean probably, doesn't mean maybe. Beyond a reasonable doubt.
What's that mean? Well, because really what the case is about is that lady, Corey. That's who the case is about. She died at age 38 because a 6'4" former football player standing over her, muffled her, and forgot to take the pillow away.
the question is whether any jury can sort out what exactly happened that Valentine's Day morning.
Do you think we'll ever know what happened with your mom?
No. If a verdict comes out this round, it comes out, I don't think we'll ever fully know.
All murder trials have their clashes between the prosecution and defense.
I would like to know who's coming like you bastards.
Are you both act like you're winning? Pretend like you're doing okay.
But the spats between Ed Parkinson and John Lovey
Morning.
were more contentious.
I've objected to his antics. I told him to shut up. I don't like it.
After 7 days of testimony in Curtis Lovelace's second murder trial, the jury continues hearing closing arguments.
So here we are. What has the state shown? Corey died from suffocation, and he did it.
Prosecutor David Robinson.
He had a motive. She was an alcoholic, she yelled at him, she yelled at the kids, and that night he had enough. The state asked me to find Curtis Lovelace guilty of murder beyond reasonable doubt.
There is no evidence in this case that this woman was smothered. She died a natural death. They have no murder weapon. They have no forensic evidence. I mean, he went out trying to prove a case where there was no crime.
This is a rebuttal, and I won't keep you long. I got good news for you. I'm not going to take long. Because he committed a stupid crime. This Mr. Smart man here, and you can do your job now, because the only thing that makes sense here is that she was suffocated. Thank you.
And with that, the jury began their deliberations.
As this case is stated in these instructions, and it's your duty to follow all of them.
I believe in everything we did, every step that we took. It was a search for the truth.
Then, in little more than 2 hours, all parties were called back to the courthouse. Unlike in the first trial, this time the jury had reached a verdict.
We were prepared in our minds, in our heart, for whatever the verdict was.
So this time, at least you know there's going to be an answer.
We know there's going to be an answer, but still, knowing that 12 people have our fate and our future and our children's future in their hands is scary.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Curtis T. Lovelace, not guilty. Signed by the foreperson and 11 jurors.
Thank you. Would anybody like to jury poll? No, no. All right.
More than 10 years after Corey died, and 2 trials accusing him for the murder of his wife, Curtis Lovelace, surrounded by his 3 sons, walks out of the courtroom a free man.
We put our trust in God, and we put our trust in the legal system, and we weren't let down. And so it's a great day for our family, a great day for all of our friends, and we're just thankful.
Kurt had absolutely nothing to do with his wife's death, and the jury saw that.
Prosecutor Ed Parkinson is clearly upset by the quick decision.
Disappointed, but the jury has spoken, so that's the end of it.
But just days after the verdict, Curtis Lovelace told 48 Hours that he and Christine still have a lot of questions about Detective Adam Gibson's investigation.
Clearly, I don't appreciate what he's done to me and my family. And whatever happens with Adam Gibson, happens with Adam Gibson. There's truth, and I believe the truth will come out.
You intend to pursue how and why this all happened?
I think those are questions we want answered.
The family remains deeply divided by the legal saga now behind them. Curtis, Christine, and the 3 boys have not spoken to Lindsay since the day Curtis was arrested in 2014.
I don't think by our choice. We were advised not to engage in a relationship with people who were possibly against Kurt.
So do you see a day when
we hope so. We talk
everyone
about
is
it
together?
We talk about it often.
Is that on the docket of things to do?
You know, I think we'd all like to see reconciliation. I'm just not sure how that happens. I'm sure it's going to be difficult.
For now, Lindsay says she is working to move forward with her own life, inspired by her mother's memory.
My mom was a beautiful person. She touched so many people. She was passionate, but that's the kind of person she was, and that's the kind of person I try to be.
My family owns a beautiful cabin in Oakley, Utah. The sound of the river, the horses that are down in the pasture, the birds, it's absolutely heaven on earth to me. My mom had given it a name, Tita's Tranquility, because of the serenity and peace.
The cabin was an awesome place to go to. As a young child, I loved going up there, bringing aunts and uncles and cousins. The cabin was about 2.5 miles off the road. You have to snowmobile in during the wintertime. It was an escape from the world for our family. It was winter of 1990.
I was 20 years old and my little sister was 16.
It was Christmas time. We were off for the holidays. There's a large Christmas tree with lots of gifts around it.
I have great memories of spending Christmas with my mom and dad. My mom even had our Christmas stockings hung under the fireplace mantel, ready for Santa to come. 3 days before Christmas, our family had to finish up our Christmas shopping and head back up to our family cabin. My mom and Grams and I arrived at the cabin first, and my hands were freezing. It was a bitter cold winter that year. I asked my mom to hurry and unlock the door. I needed to run in and run my hands under some water, and I would be right back down to help her. I got to the top of the stairs and saw a gray flash go behind the refrigerator. And the first thought that popped in my mind was, oh, a cousin's here already, and was gonna jump out and say, boo. It didn't turn out that way. Behind the refrigerator came a frizzy-headed man in a gray sweatshirt with his pistol pointed at me. I assumed that he would want to just rob us and be on his way. As soon as my mom came to the top of the stairs out from the back bedroom, another robber with thick Coke bottle glasses on was pointing a gun at my mother. My mom was saying to him, "What is it you want? Why are you here? I'll give you anything." Seconds after she had said that, gunfire started imploding, exploding, explosion from everywhere. I saw my mom go down. I turned at that point and looked over my shoulder to my Grams and saw her get shot in the head and blood spray everywhere. I heard her gasp for some breath, and then it was just dead silence. I felt pretty certain that they were dead. My thoughts were turned to knowing that within minutes, my dad and sister would be coming. I can remember hearing snowmobiles coming in the distance and my heart sinking to my gut, knowing that that was my dad and sister. It felt like slow motion and quick all at once. I can remember the screams and Grams falling off the stool and my mom reaching over her chest saying I'd been shot. I started to plan ahead. I knew that there was a car. I knew my dad left the car keys underneath the mat. If I got these men out of the cabin and into the car, my dad and my sister would be safe. As the noise of the snowmobiles became closer, the man in the gray sweatshirt grabbed me from behind around the neck, put his gun to my back.
Dad and I arrived at the cabin, and as soon as we got off the snowmobiles, a man jumped out from the garage with a full ski mask on and a gun and demanded that we come inside right away. Don't move, don't move. Don't move, don't do anything.
My dad could see tears in my eyes, and it was an unspoken communication, and he knew at that point that something awful had happened to Mom and Grams. The man asked my dad if he had any money. He reached into his pockets and pulled out what he had and threw it down to the ground. The man in the Coke bottle glasses was instructed by the other to shoot my dad. He pulled back the hammer, I heard it, and he refused to fire.
So then the other man restraining my sister pulled his gun out, pointed it at my dad, pulled the trigger once, click, no fire, twice, click, no fire. And then the third one went off. That blast was so close I could feel it.
I had no doubt in my mind that he was dead, just like Mom and Grams. I was terrified to just think that the trauma would not stop. It kept going. Didn't make any sense to me. I had no idea what was happening or why. These men that were in the cabin, I knew that they had been there for a while. There was food eaten, there was Christmas presents open. It wasn't just that we walked in and startled them or scared them. They had actually waited for our family to return home. Their plan was to destroy their evidence and burn it to the ground. There was always gas cans full of gas for the snowmobiles.
They immediately got busy doing things.
They pour gas everywhere and set the cabin on fire. I can remember hearing the smoke alarms going off as the fire was already ablazing inside the cabin.
There was a sense of urgency. They began telling us, we gotta hurry and load the snowmobiles and get out of here. I had this feeling inside of me that we needed to listen and do what they said until the moment came to where Lene and I could make our escape.
My sister and I drove these awful men on the snowmobiles out of the cabin. I drove one man behind me, and my sister drove the other man behind her.
I had all kinds of different plans of how to wreck the snowmobile, how to throw him off into a tree, how to get rid of him. But all I could think of is I couldn't leave my sister.
I can remember wanting to stay close enough that I could still see my sister. I felt a sense of security, knowing that she was still there.
There was no one to help us. There was nowhere to go. We're in the middle of the mountains, on snowmobiles.
We headed up to the main gate and saw my Uncle Randy.
I seen the snowmobiles come up the trail, 2 snowmobiles, and I go, oh, look, there's my nieces. I knew it was the girls with 2 people on the back. And I go, wow, they got boyfriends. I walked over there and tried to greet him and say hi. And I waved my hands in there, and they just drove by me. And I go, that's weird. That's not my nieces. They don't do that to me.
I saw my uncle. My uncle had pulled up and he waved at us, and we just kind of looked at him and turned back, and the men said, who was that? Somebody that must live up here, just being nice. I knew his life could be in danger. I knew if these men knew Randy was our uncle there, that they would have killed him. We were up there in the mountains. There was no one around. It was just my sister and I and two men that were dangerous that had a gun. There was a feeling of being completely vulnerable. Once we arrived at the family car, they had two guns. Each of them had a gun, and the dark-headed man loaded his gun in the trunk. And as he loaded his gun in the trunk, he pulled his jacket open and he had a knife, and he looked at me and goes, "Don't worry, I'm just as good with a knife as I am a gun."
And then I seen the Lincoln come out across the street. And I go, well, there they are again. I was walking up to the car as they were pulling out, and I was actually looking in the back, and I think I seen Lene in the back. I waved my hands again. I go, "Stop."
I knew that if we were to call out or plead for help or act like we knew Randy, that Randy would be shot as well. So he was waving his arms, and my sister and I just pretended we didn't know who he was.
The car just drove right by me. I knew something's wrong. I don't think it was a minute. I seen another snowmobile come up with this person on it, and I look, and I go, well, he's no coat on, and no gloves, no helmet, and I go, wow, who is this? And I look, and I go, oh my God, it's my brother, Rolf. And his face is just huge and full of blood, and just big. His eyes swelled shut, blood sickles, because it was cold. He was in really bad shape, and he says, I've been shot, my wife has been killed, and my daughters have been kidnapped. I start heading down the canyon as fast as I could. I'm in panic. Rolf's in the back, full of blood, laying on the back seat. 20 years ago, your cell service did not work up there whatsoever in that canyon. And I kept trying and trying and trying. There are two things on my mind. Save the girls, get him onto life flight. I come up to the back of the Lincoln. I know the girls are kidnapped. I know the guys that got guns in the car there. I'm going, what do I do? Do I run them off the road? Still trying to call out on the mobile. And my mobile kicked in. I got 911. She says, tell me what direction they're going. We got police, we got people in the area. I go, well, they're turning on the road, they're heading towards Camas. I go, I need a helicopter, and the phone went dead. I pulled in the gas station, went over to the payphone, and got 911 back on the phone again. And I go, guys, I need a helicopter now.
We noticed a cop car pass us and turn around and begin to follow us. Both men began to panic. I remember looking over, the speedometer was going over 90 miles an hour.
We turned right down towards a canyon and went another mile or so and then fell. The car fell off an embankment.
I remember looking up because the car was at an angle and noticing the entire road above us we came down was full of maybe a couple cops, but mostly people in common clothes, drawn down with pistols and shotguns and rifles at us. And I just remember how amazed I was that there were so many people there so fast.
There was cops pointing guns at me, and my little sister says, no, that's my sister. And I don't think they'd received information that there was even hostages in the car.
I reached back for my sister's hand and grabbed her hand and said, duck.
And we both ducked, and we were praying and just squeezing each other's hand. We've always had a connection, even as little children, a special connection where we can feel each other. She's always been a great comfort to me.
The suspects were taken from the vehicle and then were secured by officers who'd arrived at the scene. These guys are obviously cowards. As long as they were in total control of a situation by use of fear and force, then they continued to function. When that control went away, that's when it stopped, and they surrendered to authorities.
The men were down on their knees with their arms behind their neck, and the cops were yelling at him to get down and surrender. And I started to yell at the cops to kill him. I said, kill him. They just killed my mom, my dad, and my grams. Kill him. Shoot him now. Kill him.
I remember a feeling of not necessarily being safe, but have survived. We're no longer in the custody of those two evil men.
The helicopter showed up. They got Rolf out of the back of my Blazer and got him into care, and he was in pretty bad shape, critical condition. And when it lifted off, I'm just praying that he makes it.
I can't imagine what had to have been going through Dad's head after he'd been shot and then shot again. And he's laying there, playing dead, trying to breathe as shallow as possible. I later learned that Dad had actually been doused with gasoline and he caught on fire himself. And he had to run into the shower and tear off his snowsuit while on fire. Having the strength to get on the snowmobile and race down that mountain to save my sister and I. How much blood he'd lost, how he couldn't see, getting down the mountain in freezing temperatures. My whole life, my dad was my hero, and that just put an exclamation point on that.
My dad was the most amazing hero that I've ever known. Beautiful, kind blue eyes. He was extremely kind and generous in every way.
The number one concern in this particular case is rescuing anybody who might need assistance. Secondly is to preserve the evidence at the crime scene. One of the most significant pieces of evidence was a video camera. Inside the video camera was a videotape. We had no idea what might be recorded on that. So at a number of junctures in that film, I was saying, oh my God, oh my God.
Hundreds of crime scenes later, it still ranks right up there. It's still very vivid to me. Probably when I got about maybe 10 feet from the door, I picked up a faint smell. It was kind of like burnt hair and maybe burnt fabric, like clothes burning. As I entered the garage, there was maybe a 12 to 18-inch puddle of blood that was fresh. As I started up the stairwell, I could see holes in the wall, bullet holes coming from one wall across the stairwell into the other wall. There was a blood smear on the wall. It looked like a bloody hand had wiped down the wall. And it almost looked like a mini war zone. There was 2 bodies. I checked for a pulse, but I knew in my mind they was deceased. I actually walked into the smoke before I really realized that the top floor of that cabin was on fire. Then our mindset went to protecting the victim's property because we thought the cabin was going to burn down. On top of the coffee table, there was a VCR camera and some tapes.
There was a double funeral for my mother and grandmother. My grandmother's name's Beth Tidwell Potts. My mother's name is Kay Tidwell Tita. I remember just so many people and families that came to love us and help us feel their love and support.
Aunt Claudia was my mom's older sister. When Mom passed, Aunt Claudia stepped in, letting us know that she was there, and it gave us all a sense of that we weren't alone.
I wanted to be there as much as I possibly could because they needed support. This was a horribly traumatizing thing for them, and we were what they had left.
Grams had a lot of energy. She was full of life.
She was a very fun, vivacious, energetic, happy grandma. She would give me permanents in my hair and make it curly, awful. I remember Mom called the aspen trees quakies. She loved the noise that the quaking aspen made in the wind. That was one of her fondest memories, and it is mine as well.
My sister was one of the most devoted mothers that I have ever known. She would give up anything for her children. She was strong-willed, and they were strong-willed, and you know, that relationship is not without conflict, but they always worked it out.
The morning of the crime, I remember turning and walking over to give my mother a hug, as I always did. And she and I had gotten a little argument earlier that morning over something silly. And she and I both looked at each other, and me at 16 years old just turned and wasn't gonna give her a hug. And I turned and walked the other way. And that's the last time I saw my mom alive.
You tell me what's your justification for taking these lives and doing this to these people that you don't even know. When I watched the videotape that had been taken from the crime scene, I expected to see pictures of family talking, playing games, doing what family folks do, but as it turns out, there were the two suspects.
Your light flashing on the phone, but I don't know.
They were opening the family's Christmas presents.
Oh, wow. What is it? Baseball card.
I remember thinking of the pure malice and hate that these men must have.
And LeMay.
What heartless jerks. Why would you do this to our family?
The two men were in their early to mid-20s. Both spent time at the Utah State Penitentiary. Vaughn Taylor had been previously convicted of an aggravated burglary. What I gather is he was a normal kid, a very normal and decent family, but that at some point he got into some conflict with the law.
I don't think I got all of this.
I'm not aware of a violent history on Mr. Edward Deli. He had been convicted of an arson. They'd been released from the penitentiary to a halfway house facility. So apparently they were given the ability to go out and look for employment. At that point, they just absconded.
I later learned that these men had hitchhiked their way up there and chose that area because one of the men had family that had a cabin in the area. They'd robbed several cabins and eventually came to our cabin because they knew we were there. They wanted to find a way to get a vehicle and get out of the country. And they waited for us all night long to return.
I'm afraid to go in there and get
This might appear to be a slam dunk case to some folks, but from an investigator's point of view, it was very complicated and very complex. Sure, it's not a whodunit, There's no question who committed the crimes, but being able to determine what criminal act each suspect committed, that was a challenge.
Von Taylor and Ed Deli very much each took their own separate part in murdering my mom and Grams. I do not feel one man in any way, shape, or form was more responsible.
They were charged with the murders, the aggravated kidnapping, the arsons, the high-speed chase. I don't remember the exact number, but in addition to the murders, there were something like 8 to 10 felonies and some misdemeanors.
I wanted them both to be sentenced to the death penalty. I wanted both of them to know that they were going to die.
Approximately 5 months after these crimes, Von Taylor pleaded guilty to 2 counts of capital murder, and the state dropped all of the other charges against him in exchange for that plea.
I believe Taylor pled guilty to his crime because there was so much cold evidence against him that that was all that he could plead, was guilty.
Taylor was an evil man. He had no remorse, no regard for life whatsoever. You could see it in his eyes. You could see it in his countenance. From the moment we saw him to the last time we saw him in court, he just had this air about him of anger and zero remorse.
Taylor opted to go to sentencing in front of a jury instead of in front of a judge. The jury sentenced him to a death sentence for both murders. So he has 2 death sentences.
I felt relieved that Taylor would be put to death for his crime. Justice had been served.
Short period of time after that, a couple of weeks, I believe, and Mr. Deli went to trial. We were as prepared, if not maybe even a little bit more prepared, to go into the Deli trial as we were with the Von Taylor trial.
I felt a great burden. I felt like they practically wanted me to be able to see the bullets coming out of the guns, that they expected me to point the exact gun in the direction of every bullet and where it hit at any given moment. I actually just had a whole epiphany of new thoughts come to that I don't think that that was helpful for a victim to have to put a weapon that they watched their family murdered with, to even have to touch it. What is the point? The weapons were already on the table. Why would I have to touch it?
Those trials are somewhat of a blur to me. I was 16 years old, and I wanted to go back and live that life I loved and not having to keep relive a nightmare. Deli's lawyer argued that he didn't do any of the shooting. These men were guilty. They committed a crime. They needed to be punished, and we needed to move on.
Lene and Trish Tita were excellent witnesses. They were very sure about the things they had seen, and very articulate, able to relate these very, very sensational things in an unemotional way. So they were extremely valuable witnesses. But we had another survivor of the case. Mr. Tita survived the assault and the attack. incredible guy.
I remember sitting and watching the look on Deli's face as he came in seeing my father, and it was very apparent to me that he did not know my father had survived. And the look on his face was just priceless. Like he had been defeated. My dad survived. We won.
He's lucky that they used the wrong gun when they shot him. They used birdshot, very ineffective. They didn't know that. You know, I think his odds of having made it and survived an incident like that are probably 1 in 1,000. He was kind of an ace in the hole, and he brought the prosecution together in an outstanding way. I expected Edward Deli to be convicted of first-degree murder. The case had been thoroughly investigated, and the prosecutor's office had done an excellent job.
I heard the verdict came out, second-degree murder with life imprisonment, and I never really understood that. I said, something's wrong. It can only be them that did this. How can he be not sentenced to death?
Deli was not convicted of first-degree murder. He was convicted of second-degree murder, and a death sentence was no longer an option once that conviction came in.
Edward Deli received second-degree murder instead of first-degree due to one jury member deciding to hold out. I felt like the courts did an injustice to our family. I felt like that he deserved to be on death row as well, just like Taylor. Deli murdered, Taylor murdered.
This was such a horrific experience for everybody here that I think we all didn't know what to say or buried it inside to where we didn't talk about this a lot.
I went through periods of anger and frustration and not understanding why. And for years and years that follow, I'd cry in silence. I spent a good 10 years hiding that pain and suppressing that pain.
I went through trying to find happiness in areas where happiness doesn't exist. I went through fear of putting my heart out there, fear of loving someone or letting someone love me, that they would abandon me. I believe it was 2001 I received a letter from Deli. I thought about it for many, many years and would go to write him a letter, and it just never felt right. It took me over 9 years to respond to Deli's letter. I held on to the letter and I reread it probably 20, 30 times. I was just very careful and guarded with my feelings. I basically wanted to get a feel if he was truly sorry. Deli has shared with me that he has grown into a man, not the same evil boy that committed the crime. I believe that I gained my freedom back for myself by choosing to forgive Deli. For me, forgiving does not mean forgetting. I do not believe Edward Deli has a place outside of prison, but when I came to the place of forgiveness, I felt a tremendous burden, relief off my shoulders. I felt free.
Lene is flawed perfection. Lene and I have been married a little over 3 years now. She's my best friend. She's everything to me. There is something in her eyes that is just it's like pure. And she's as flawed as the rest of us, but she has this innocence that still is there that I just love.
Nathan changed my life by opening his heart and sharing his true self and giving me the freedom to do the same. I have 4 kids and 5 beautiful stepkids. And I just feel like it's a beautiful start of a new beginning. For me to be a survivor has become a beautiful gift. I believe that I can share it with others. After the cabin had burnt, we went and rebuilt it and made it even better than it was before. I can remember my dad. He would say this to me quite often. He would say, "Lene, I know lightning strikes." He says, "but lightning never strikes twice in the same location." And I would find great peace in that. Sometimes, if I ever would have fear, I would just hear my dad say, "Lene, you're gonna be safe."
It's fabulous. We love it there. We need to do a hike before I go down. We actually go up there and enjoy family and friends, and we play and we relax, and we bond. They're not going to take away from us the things that we love and we enjoy in our life. They took our mom, they took our grams, but that's where it ends.
The cabin's magical. The cabin is healing.
When my father was diagnosed with cancer, our whole family came together, and that last 6 to 8 weeks of his life were so absolutely incredible.
He pulled me aside, spent about an hour and a half with me, just me and him. Probably gave me one of the greatest compliments I had in my life. And I'm still just a touch uneasy about it. That he knew Lene would be okay and that he could go because he knew I would take care of her.
When my father passed, it was very peaceful. I had the privilege of being right by his side as he took his last breaths, and his spirit has never left me. Anytime I need my dad, he's there. He comes in some of the most unique and special times. I very much still feel that my father is there. I have 2 beautiful little girls, and when I look into their eyes, I see both my mother and my father and everything that's loving and pure. I have an awesome life. I love my life now, and I wouldn't say that the incident in 1990 defines me, but I would say it's helped make me who I am today.
Can you hear the wind blowing through the trees? Can you hear the wind when it's talking to the leaves?
I think my sister would be absolutely delighted if she looked down to see the healing that Lene and Tricia have gone through and what they've done with their lives.
Let the wind blow, let the wind, let it tell you where to go.
I feel very much so that this experience has changed me as a person. I choose that it's a part of who I am. It's my life story.
Because there's always demons behind every door. And if you let the wind blow, then the demons ain't there no more. And let the wind.
What we experienced together, that created a bond that obviously I couldn't have with anybody else. And I'm glad that we were there together. And I couldn't ask for more.
Let the wind blow, let the wind blow. Just don't let the wind, don't let it blow you down.